Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're finally going to start Mistborn Era 2. So first up, we're going to talk about Alloy of Law by Brandon Sanderson. So as always, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and let's begin. So Alloy of Law is the first book in the second era of Mistborn, and it is, to my not even chagrin, but to my delightful surprise, I have now been able to recategorize it as steampunk instead of Western. Because my initial impression of it is that it was Western, because there is a lot of Western feel in the story. Because it's steampunk, so it takes place at the verge of the Industrial Revolution. So essentially, society is coming out of a Western aesthetic and going into the Industrial Revolution. So that time in between is essentially steampunk. So it's really interesting to have a character who is essentially a worn out lawman who is a old cowboy kind of guy from the West, the Roughs, and he is now coming into the city to basically make good on his noble name because there is a lot of people that are employed by the companies and stuff that his house controls that are dependent on him to make sure that his house doesn't fall. Because if his house falls into disrepair or even disrepute, then they could lose all their jobs and like they're responsible for so many people's income and stuff. So just morally, he's like, I have to go and make good for my family because my uncle, who more or less squandered all of our money, is now dead. So he leaves the place that he's known for, for 20 years now and loves the roughs, the West, where he feels like he's a true contribution and he feels like his efforts and his skills are truly necessary to go back to the city to deal with politicking and stuff. And initially, he was not going to go back. He was not going to deal with this because he found a woman out there that he fell in love with and he married her. Her name is Leslie, and they both were like law people. They both were hunters. They would hunt down lawbreakers and criminals and stuff, and they would basically have these shootouts. And like they were this lawfully good Bonnie and Clyde kind of situation. They had a great relationship and they loved their work and they always were just really confident with each other and they just had this great rapport. And during one day, during the situation where they're fighting someone that was also an Alamancer, who is what is known as a twinborn, I think he was a twinborn. Essentially, there is a shootout, and Wax's wife, Leslie, was taken capture. She was basically held hostage as Wax had the gun on the perp. He was about to shoot him, and the moment he goes to shoot him, the guy purposely and with unerring precision moves Leslie into the way of the bullet, causing Wax to kill his own wife. So that depression and that shock of an action like hit him so hard that he couldn't even stay out in the roughs. He basically immediately went back to Ellendale and went to go deal with his family stuff after having dealt with about what was probably about a year's long catatonic type depression. And it's just essentially the entire motivation of his character, which is kind of lame because it's a very old and tired trope. It's fridging the wife. It's like hurting a female character to to motivate a male character. And it's one of the tropes that Brandon kind of relies on a lot. He has a lot of dead wife energy in a lot of his books. It's a trope he's getting away from nowadays, but it's very common in some of his older stuff, some of his mid-era stuff, going up to his current stuff. So it's just one of those tropes that you can't really get around with Brandon sometimes. But he does it pretty well, especially considering what happens later in the series. So Wax is a very stern, very serious kind of guy. He is a lawman, but like because of his depression, he is now like less like arrogant and swashbuckling, I guess, if that applies to a Western character. Because that was kind of the impression I got that he was when he was out in the roughs. But when he comes back after losing Leslie and stuff, he's just really in the mood of I just want to do what I'm expected to do so I can just move on or whatever. But one of the things that he has to do in order to help his house is he has to get married because his family doesn't have much money right now, but they have a very well known and valuable name. He basically has to marry someone who has a no name but has a lot of money. And he does that, and he is introduced to Steris, his betrothed, who is a woman who is clearly on the autism spectrum, but she has really interesting quirks and stuff. She basically has roadmaps and rules to life because she doesn't interact with everyone in the typical ways. So in order for her to basically fit into society in the way she feels like she needs to, she basically makes rules for everything. So she understands everything to a great degree and then will make contingency lists and plans and potential issues and things that'll happen, and she just tries to plan every single thing out so that she's not so taken aback or so completely confused by general society stuff. And she's gotten so good at it over the years that she's almost predictive. The way she can just assume things will happen based on contextual information. She's like, okay, this might be happening. This might be a thing. Like, there's a possibility of this or that or whatever. And it's like, it works to such a degree that it's almost predictive. And it's really, really entertaining. And it makes her a really fun character. In this book, we don't get a whole lot of her because essentially we're introduced to her and then she's put off on a shelf. And we are following Wax, his best friend and deputy Wayne, and Steris's sister, half-sister, Marcy, who is in college for like criminal justice, basically to be a lawyer, which is not really, it's kind of rare, despite the fact that in this time period, Vin is like a religious figure, and there's just like this reverence around her and stuff. I mean, it kind of essentially puts pressure on the rest of the women in society to be badasses, but it's still seen as uncommon for a woman to go into the constabulary and like go into law and stuff like that. So what Marcy is doing is actually, very much breaking the mold. And throughout her time, she's researched Wax and Wayne a lot. So she knows about a lot of their adventures and exploits when they were out in the roughs. And she's kind of developed a crush on Wax. So it's interesting to see them go through this story arc, because the main meat of the story arc is still kind of in the flavor of a spaghetti western. It's really a simplistic kind of story. It's like they stumble upon this issue and then they have to chase down the bad guy. That's one of the things that when I initially read it, that still left me feeling like it was just a basic spaghetti western that was predictable because of the nature of what it was and just not that interesting. So it kind of left me with sour grapes a little bit, because effectively it's a train heist. They find this group of bandits that are known as the Vanishers that are taking over train cargoes or taking trains and stealing the cargoes, but doing it in such a way where no one can really figure out how. That's why they become known as the Vanishers, because it's almost like a magic trick the way they do it. So we go through the story a little bit, and because Wax is a just randomly good detective, he just kind of figures all of the stuff out about how it works and how they're doing it and everything. And we eventually end up in a train fight, a big like shootout kind of thing on the train where they're running on top of the train and all this stuff. Very classic kind of Western stuff. The action scene itself wasn't like amazing, especially in comparison to some of the other stuff that Brandon has written. But it was fun for the nature of the genre. It wasn't my favorite, but it was definitely interesting enough. But one of the more interesting things is the characters. I think this story, above anything else, is an exploration of character types. Like Wax, Waxilium, is a really basic kind of character in my mind, mostly because his personality doesn't pop, at least in comparison to people like Steris and Wayne and Marcy. Marcy has these interesting quirks, and she's doing things that are against the grain, and she has these insecurities and things because she's an allomancer, but her ability is the inverse of Wayne's ability. Instead of speeding up time within a given space, she slows down time. So to her, it feels useless because it means the world around her will be moving at super speed where she's standing still. So she can't think of any scenario in which it's useful. So she's kind of self-conscious about it, and she's like shy and stuff because she's not, on the level of Wax and Wayne, who's been doing this stuff for like 20 years or more. So it's really interesting to see her while she's like developing / harboring this crush on Wax while trying to just do her job and stuff, while trying to be like I hate the phrase, but like one of the boys, but like, one of the crew, one of the detectives and stuff. She don't want to stand out too much. So it's just a lot of interesting character dynamics with her. And then Wayne has to be my absolute favorite character that Brandon's written in a while, because he is so much fun. He comes off as basically a basic class clown kind of character, but we find out there's so much more depth to him because of his origin. He essentially was saved by Wax when he tried to kill. Actually, he did kill someone. He was a thief and he killed someone, but felt so terrible about it. It like destroyed him mentally and stuff. And Wax knew that he was the type of person that really needed redemption and could he wasn't the kind of person that you just put down. He was a stupid kid that made a terrible mistake and not like a true hardened criminal. So he kind of took him under his wing and kind of helped him. But Wayne, even to this day, 20 years later, still feels incredible guilt for what he did and goes and gives as much money as he can to the children of the man that he killed. And they never forgive him. They won't forgive him for what he did. And he understands it and takes it and accepts it. And it is like the most mature, amazing development for a character like him that I've ever seen, especially after the personality we get to know throughout the book. You wouldn't think that that's the kind of person that he is, but when we get that scene, I was like, wow. So it was really, really fun. So yes, I guess I'm going to wrap it up here. That was a very, very interesting book. I really liked it a lot. Well, a lot more than I liked it the first time, because I guess I got my preconceived notions of it being a Western out of my head. So it was a lot easier to just sit back and like and enjoy it. And then I really enjoy the characters. I enjoy the only real complaint I have is that we don't get much of the characters and we don't get much of the new world. We don't get much of anything. This is kind of a taste. But in context, the entire era 2 feels more satisfying. But these little pieces at a time are still not as satisfying as like just the Final Empire or just Hero of Ages or something was. So it's interesting to me that this one is so much more interdependent on itself to be enjoyable, at least by me, than other Brandon stuff. So yes, we'll of course continue that conversation with the next one, which will be Shadows of Self. So make sure you stick around and check that out. So go ahead and leave me a comment down below. What did you like about the Alloy of Law? Do you think that the Western aesthetic kind of held this story back from being as good as it could have been? Let me know about that in the comments down below. So make sure you hit the like button and leave me a comment and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And I will talk to y'all next time. Peace.